Good morning, everyone. It's LaJune.
Morning.
Morning.
So we have a full agenda today, and in the interest of trying to get everyone out within the allotted hour and 57 minutes, because I wasted 3 being late, we'll get started. At this time, we'd like to call the September 19th, 2023 meeting of the Executive Committee to order. To confirm quorum and attendance, I'll ask Ms. Armstrong to please conduct a roll call vote of Executive Committee members.
Ms. Artizana? Here. Ms. Baidoon?
Here.
Mr. Caldwell? Mr. Cabina?
Present.
Ms. Clovis?
Here.
Ms. Flynn?
Here.
Mayor Hopewell?
Present.
Mr. Lutz?
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Here.
Dr. McMahon?
Here.
Ms. Montgomery Tabron?
Here.
Mayor Neely?
Present.
Dr. Ono?
Now
Dr.
Doherty representing Dr. Ono for the University of Michigan.
Okay. Dr. Pink? Mr. Rich?
Here.
Mr. Schultz? Ms. Thorson?
Here.
Mr. Tomzak? Mr. Waddington? And Dr. Walker Graffia.
Here.
Thank you. Tom's coming. Okay, thank you. We do have a quorum and we understand others are on their way.
Great. Are there any communications from the secretary?
None today.
Excellent. At this time, I will not provide an opportunity for public comment. As always, please keep your public comments to 3 minutes or less. Ms. Armstrong will be keeping time, of course, with some leniency to finish a thought. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, I'll first ask for public comment from anyone who is attending the meeting in person. Is there anyone attending the meeting in person who would like to provide a public comment? Yeah.
My name is Marjorie.
You need to come up here so they can hear you.
Absolutely. Oh, is this our mic here? Okay. My name is Marjorie Steele. I am a resident of Big Rapids in Mecosta County. Little letter here. I think I can get this done in 3 minutes. If not, please, I'll be real close, I promise. Given the recent attacks on Michigan communities by the public-private Michigan Economic Development Corporation and its local economic development corporations, it is time local and municipal governments become aware of this quasi-governmental agency and its tactics used to attract businesses. The MEDC was formed under the Granholm administration primarily to promote the Pure Michigan tourism campaign and has since grown to become an extension of Michigan's executive branch, bringing mega sites into rural communities, destroying prime farmland with toxic wind and solar, and embedding multinational corporate interest into unsuspecting communities. Many of these projects involve foreign companies and foreign investors. The MEDC ignores calls from small business owners and startup entrepreneurs, including many of my neighbors. Grants and money from the Michigan Strategic Fund, aka SOAR, and the Critical Industries Program, which gave a grant to Goshen, and the Strategic Site Readiness Program are used to entice international billionaires to locate their operations to Michigan. Yet few people across the state realize the money being spent to promote these unwise deals is coming out of Michigan taxpayer pockets. In Shiawassee County, the Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership, or SEDP, has been instrumental in bringing the largest solar facility in the state of Michigan to the county. This 1,900-acre project was not publicly announced by the SEDP or local press until a special land use permit was applied for. In Big Rapids, the right place quietly cut a deal with Mecosta County and Big Rapids and Green Charter Townships to build the Goshen EV mega site atop wetlands with no environmental impact statement, while local citizens remained completely unaware. The MEDC and its local EDCs behave as if they are kings and we citizens are peasants, completely ignoring their responsibility to the residents they're impacting and whose wealth is funding their development casino game. Grassroots organizers like myself are asking township and municipal governments across Michigan who are members of a local EDC to reconsider the value of that relationship. It is time for our townships to ask cities, for our townships and cities to ask themselves, are we as a unit of government benefiting from the membership in this organization? What has our EDC actually done for our specific local community? Are our taxpayer dollars purchasing anything other than heartache and destruction from these EDCs? The city of Durand has already withdrawn its membership from the SEDP based on their handling of the megasite property in Vernon Township, and other townships across Shiawassee County are following suit. and soon across the rest of the state as well. It is time for us as residents and as local government officials to stop enabling the abuse of these taxpayer-funded developers. It is time for us to take back control of our own counties and land and to invest in developments which bring value to we the people, not smug developers and distant billionaires. So pack your bags and prep your resumes. We the people of Michigan unsubscribe. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Oh,
comment. Are there any other public comments from people attending in person?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Sharp, and I am here again to go over the situation with overspending our tax dollars on things that we don't need. I was here the last time and I explained how it's destroying the environment. We have a huge issue in our community that would affect our aquifer and our cold water streams going through there. They're talking about moving wetlands for something that would literally destroy our environment for the children's future, for our future. I'm a grandmother with 12 grandchildren. I want them to have a rural community. Right now, we have a 15-minute city threat in a rural community that I've been in for over 7 generations, still own the same land that they settled on in my family. This is arrogance at its best when you have something coming in with our tax dollars that would literally destroy it. The last time I was here, I expressed Marshall. Now we're up to like 6 communities that we're connecting and growing, and we don't like what we see. We want more consideration for the environment. We do not see the value in 15-minute cities, 15-minute apartments being brought up into a rural community. Even the ones you're doing in cities are kind of a waste of money and time to me. And I saw a lot of, like all proud and happy for what you're doing, but you have to realize there's a huge population that does not agree. And we would like to have more of a culturally friendly environment for our children to grow up the way we did. We don't want a city, and I feel that people that do want a city in our community need to move to a city. We don't want it brought up there. We don't want 4-lane highways. We don't want any of it. There's ways to do this without destroying our historical community that's been there for well over 150 years. It's really sad to me that I have to speak for the children that can't speak for themselves because no one wants to listen here. And we just keep seeing money floating out by the millions. And instead of incorporating that as an example, COVID dollars for towers in our community, that money could have went for our community on many other levels that would have enhanced tourism, small business, things that are bringing the mom and pop stores back instead of pushing them out for franchises. We don't want franchises. We want the mom and pop, small business, small community. We have Reed City, Paris, Big Rapids. My entire life, we had to get in a car to drive for your supplies. We don't want to have it where it's just down the road. We like the little convenience store, mom and pop's community, rural, self-sustaining communities where we can thrive as a community without a huge embarrassment because it's caused huge issues in our community. There's a huge population that doesn't want it, and yet they're discounting us as if we're not even relevant. We are relevant. My family's been there for generations. My husband's family's been there for generations. We want you to consider the money you're spending of taxpayer dollars for things that are not necessary. Solar farms, windmills.
Mr. Chair, that's 3 minutes.
So, as to wrap it up, those are the opposite of green. If you really investigate what it's doing, it's not saving the environment. Marshall, Michigan is a huge example of destruction. And I don't even think it's legal what they're doing down there because they're fighting it 24 hours like we are.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Sharp. Are there any other individuals that like to make a public comment in person? Is there anyone attending the meeting virtually or remotely who would like to provide a public comment?
If you're attending remotely and would like to provide a public comment, if you can unmute now, and I will go in order of what I see on my list here.
One last time, is there anyone attending the meeting remotely who would like to provide public comment?
Yes, I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Brandy Sweet. I'm from Green Charter Township, where the said Goshen battery plant is coming. And I have a few things that I don't know if you guys are all aware of, or I'd just like to make everybody aware of, because I reached out to Randy Thielen in regards to the SIP grant and the Michigan Strategic Fund. It says that with a SIP grant, they shall consider and document at least all of the following criteria before entering into a written agreement for a qualified investment. One of those criteria is listed that must be considered and documented before entering into a written agreement is the extent and level of environmental contamination. So my question to him was, where can I find the proof and consideration and documentation pertaining to Goshen and the level of environmental contamination? And I said I would attach the link where it says that. I sent that to him. I told him if he did not know where I can find that, could he please refer me to somebody that could? He did respond to me and said, thanks for your note. Your question is legal in nature. So I am connecting you to Christian Armstrong, who is an attorney at the MEDC. She can best help you. So her response, and this is the level and consideration for environmental contamination with an EV battery factory that holds many, many environmental threats, toxic materials, processes that you guys might want to research and learn about yourselves. And it seems to me would have an EIS and all of these things attached before millions of dollars of our taxpayers' money is given to somewhere. We want to know why environmental impact statements aren't made ahead of time before funding is given to these places. Her response to me was, let me get to it, is the statutory considerations were laid out in the briefing memo that was presented to the MSF board on October 5th, 2022. That memo can be found at this link. Okay, so it's a small paragraph. The environmental consideration, your guys' documentation, is an environmental assessment of the site has been completed and shows soil conditions are suitable for construction of the planned facility. A geotechnical evaluation is currently underway, but based on the information available, including the construction of the facility, it is assumed geotechnical conditions will support the planned facility, and Goshen is in compliance with all environmental permits and regulations. Again, that was back in October. Again, right now, today, you can reach out to Eagle yourself, and there is no permit application submitted. Eagle does not know what they are doing, cannot give information until those permits are submitted. So therefore, you gave all of this money. There's infrastructure, the property is bought, they are moving ahead, no consideration for local support neither. That is also to be documented and considered, and that has not been. There has been no survey, there has been no nothing, but opposition and opposition and opposition from the community members and the residents that live here. So therefore, we would like an answer. Why and how can all of this money, this does not make us feel any better with knowing that you are doing this to our community. You are doing this all across Michigan. Like the other lady just said, we are in works with 6 other communities, 6 other mega sites that you're all the same. No environmental consideration. Do you guys know about Altium Cells battery plant? If you do not, you need to look into that. Electrocutions, spills, air quality issues, reports and
We're
reports.
at 3 minutes, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
So I will summarize as in environmental consideration needs to be taken in but forefront. Without a healthy environment, there is not healthy people. Without healthy people, there is no need for economic development. So therefore, get the priorities in order and start putting the planet and the people first, because this is just backwards completely. Look into lithium mining, all of it. Nevada, Thacker Pass, what is happening across the United States. It's unjust and it's not fair.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your comment, Ms. Sweet. Is there anyone else participating remotely that wishes to provide a public comment? Hearing and seeing none. As normal, due to the hybrid nature of this meeting and to ensure accuracy for meeting minutes, I ask that you identify yourself before offering a motion. All votes will be taken by roll call. The first item is the approval of the July 18th, 2023 minutes. Are there any edits or changes that need to be made? If not, I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
I motion we approve the minutes, Fay Baydoun.
We have a second.
Support Sheldon Neely, Mayor Flint.
We have a motion from Fay Baydoun and a second from Mayor Neely. Any discussion about the minutes before the roll call vote? Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call vote.
Mr. Rosanna,
This is Elizabeth Ardisana, yes.
Ms. Baydoun,
Yes.
Mr. Cabina,
Yes.
Ms. Clovis?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn,
Yes.
Mr. Hopewell,
Yes.
Mr. Lutz,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Approved, yes.
Ms. Montgomery Tavron,
Yes.
Mayor Neely,
Yes.
Dr. Pink,
Yes.
Mr. Rich,
Yes.
Ms. Thorson,
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak,
Yes.
and Dr. Walker Griffith.
Yes.
And your motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Great. At this time, I'd like to pass the microphone to Quentin to do the CEO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will be brief in the interest of time because I want to make sure that I pass the microphone and the baton to my colleagues. Just three big picture points. First of all, I want to thank the executive committee for their continued service. We're very grateful. You're all incredibly busy. And so we're grateful for the time and the attention and the care that you do provide, not only the overall committee, but to the various subcommittees. So, and we'll hear from those subcommittee chairs as well subsequently. The second thing I want to just comment very briefly about the UAW strike. And it was just a very brief comment. I think I'm very encouraged that both sides continue to are in conversations, are in dialogue. We have been monitoring the situation. I'm encouraged that the White House has sent the acting Secretary of Labor as well as Gene Sperling to help in those negotiations. So I'm guardedly optimistic that there will be a resolution soon. I do want to turn your attention before I pass it on to my colleagues in the packet before you. I just want to talk about our economic development framework, which is really set by our elected officials. It was announced in June, and we'll talk about how all our metrics, our strategic plan fall under the Make It in Michigan economic development framework, which is really focused on three things: developing and attracting people, cultivating and revitalizing places, and competing for and winning projects. The imperative of this is that we all realize that economic development only matters to the extent that it benefits people. And you're going to hear further as we go through the presentation about how the various teams of my colleagues are working in these three areas as it relates to the Talent Solutions team on people. We also see, I think this group provided very helpful feedback on a talent attraction campaign that my colleague Michelle Grinnell will be discussing shortly. Places. We understand the imperative of making sure that we have sustainable competitive growth that and make sure that we have places where people want to be, and do it in such a way that's responded to the unique needs and desires of particular individual communities. And then we also basically, we're living through the imperative of competing in a number of sectors, whether it be the mobility sector, semiconductor, clean energy, defense and aerospace, life sciences, agribusiness, fintech. All these sectors have various and are making location decisions. You all in your individual lives are making, professional lives are making decisions about where to deploy capital. It is very mobile, it is very fluid, it's very competitive as people respond to federal industrial policy. So having said that, I want to talk a little bit about the economic development framework. And then if I may, Mr. Board Chair, open up for any questions before I hand it over. Is our economic development framework focus as we try to make it in Michigan, make more in Michigan, focus on people, places, and projects. We need to make sure, given what is happening at the federal level, Michigan receives its share of those private investment dollars that will enable us to secure our fair share of that. Whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act, whether it's the Infrastructure Jobs Act, whether it is the CHIPS Act, whether it is programs that are coming from the Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, the Department of Defense. We need to make sure that as private actors, corporations are making their decisions on where to invest, Michigan wins those dollars. And we are very encouraged about the process that we're doing. I think you've talked, and many of you were involved when the closing fund, which is formerly known as SOAR, was originally created. We're grateful for that support, and that continues to have success. There are other opportunities as well that are being under consideration legislatively. I won't get into too much detail, but we can talk about them subsequently. You have that information in your packet. With that, I would like to open it up for any questions you might have for me before I turn it over to, I believe, Michelle Grinnell, our Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications, and then we will have successive handoffs to colleagues moving forward. Any questions for me before I turn it over to Michelle? Hearing none, Michelle, take it away.
All right, thanks, Quentin. So I
Make it working for you.
awesome, thank you. I have checked in with this group a number of times over the past year on all of our campaigns, but particularly on the progress for the National Attraction Talent Marketing campaign. And so we're really excited. The finish line is very much in sight for us. With our Michigan Life website going live at the end of this month. And then we are going to be doing a broader launch of the You Can in Michigan campaign. So look for that sometime around the second week in October. And you can see here where we have netted out is on a campaign called You Can in Michigan. And so before we jump into kind of that labor of love and honestly a few cheers along the way, it's been a long road. I wanted to kind of level set on what we have been spending the last year doing. So as we've talked about, we did this campaign in phases, and in tandem with the development of the broader national campaign and building this concept and bringing it to life. We also jumped really quickly at the beginning of the year in an in-state media with the goal of connecting existing talent in the state with open positions in our mobility and EV industry in partnership with our Michigan Works agencies and our talent action teams. So you can see phase 1 and phase 2, we started with just West Michigan, and then we were able to expand that in June to all of Michigan, and we're doing a tester market in San Francisco. We also did some very targeted marketing at Michigan State, University of Michigan, and Michigan Tech, which is where our Michigander EV Scholar pilot program was. So just some quick results of that. We've had just with this phase 1 and phase 2 scale up, more than 230,000 clicks to our Michigan EV Jobs microsite and more than 1,700 prospect leads generated. Right now we're at about 525 people employed or trained through these campaign efforts. And we're expecting with our next report from our Michigan Works agencies to be closer to 1,000. So we're really excited about what we were able to accomplish this year here in Michigan, as we were also working to create this national campaign. In terms of the UCAN and Michigan, we've had really extensive stakeholder meetings and input at various stages, including the initial ideation and creative concepts, feedbacks on specific concepts that informed the creative that I'm going to share with you today. Website content, we did regional briefings with all 10 of the prosperity regions to walk them through their regional content on the website so that they could have input and buy-in, and we can make sure that we're being really good partners. Because again, our goal is to be a referral, not to be the end site for the talent that we are working to attract through this campaign. The campaign included market research, creative testing to understand the effectiveness of proposed campaigns, both relative to existing campaigns. So we tested Pure Michigan, against UCAN and Michigan, but also some of our competitor states. So we tested these concepts against Ohio, Wisconsin. And so we're going in really confident that we're going to be able to outperform those competitors. And that also provided really important direction on the creative itself. So these are our core audiences. We've got skilled tech talent, both professionals and students, and this is both in Michigan and nationally. And then we've also got our trade tech talent, both professionals and students, and this is really going to be targeted here in state and surrounding feeder markets. And there is a through line of tech, which we've talked about with focus industries of EV mobility, semiconductors, medical device technology, and other tech industries. We're going to be in a lot of places. This is a very multimedia integrated campaign, so we'll be online. We'll be on social media. We've got some new social channels that I'll share with you. We're going to have videos. We're going to be radio. We're going to be on campuses. And so this is really meant to be not just a paid campaign, but we've got a very strong earned media component, social media component to it as well. So video is going to be a big component of the execution of the campaign. So this includes a flagship campaign video that I'm really excited to share with you today. We're also going to have testimonials from Michiganders who relocated back to Michigan and who are working and studying in these key industries. We've got TikTok videos. We're starting a series of day in the life videos on our new Michigan Life Social, where people can take us into, our first was a young lady who worked at Domino's. And so we spent the day at Domino's with her and then what she did after work. And really highlighting the companies and the lifestyles here in the state. So I'm going to play our video. All right, we'll see if it works.
Sounds great. Looks great.
Oh, here we go. All right, let me see. I think it'll play twice. So
Not sure if it's just me, but I can't hear.
we can send a link around too. Yeah, we'll go. These don't require sound. So the video and what I'm showing you now is really meant to be like top of the funnel to get people thinking about Michigan. If you'll recall some of the research that we did to understand how both people in Michigan and outside of Michigan thought of Michigan both as a place to live and a place of work. when we asked them what they thought about Michigan as a destination for tech jobs, the biggest answer by far was, I don't know. So it's not even that like there's a lot of bad perceptions, they're just not even, people just aren't thinking about it. So the video and some of the creative that you're gonna see here is really focused on that top of the funnel, getting people's attention, getting them excited about Michigan. And we really took this concept of work and life and brought it together in a really literal, aspirational way. And so you've got engineer, and behind her is Nordhaus Dunes. You've got advanced manufacturing down in Campus Martius. We have, you saw in the video in this, we know winter and cold is something that people have a bad perception of. So we want to lean into it. We want to show winter in a positive way. We want to acknowledge that we have winter here in the state. We've got our biotech, and that is in Rockford at the Merrill Bike Trails. This is at Glen Lake. This is one of my favorites. This is kind of a literal like work life step away from your desk. And this is what we got. And this is leaning into the design industry. And then we've got our semiconductor. This one is the one that people have this like, love it, hate it. Like this one elicits a lot of really strong responses from people, which from a marketing perspective, we're really enthusiastic about. And so again, these are, we'll use these in a variety of ways, out of home, print, billboard, or digital media. And again, this is meant to be the top of the funnel that gets people's attention, that gets them to click through and find out a little bit more. But we also know that it's really, really important to hear from people who have done this. Authenticity is a really important component. And so as part of this campaign, we interviewed 8 individuals. These are all folks who live in Michigan, have have relocated to Michigan for either to study tech or careers in tech. We have 4 of these are folks that are international. We've got a couple at Michigan Tech. They represent the whole state. And what we've done as a starting point is cut together 6 videos from these testimonials that highlight things like the affordability of Michigan, the diversity in tech in Michigan, the ability to do recreation in Michigan, and hearing from these people firsthand about their experiences in Michigan so that they're not always hearing it from the state. We also have the michiganlife.org, which is our new website. And this is really going to take people on that journey to either build their career and serve them up to different industries and job opportunities, or live here, which is where you're gonna find those regional pages and activity pages. Again, the idea is not that they find everything on this website, but that we're working really closely with our regional partners and our industry partners and Leo and Michigan Works to get them to the places and the resources that already exist in the state. And then I mentioned we're going to have new social channels. We have the Michigan Life, and we are already live on LinkedIn, Facebook group, and Instagram, and we've got some other channels coming soon. But again, this is just an opportunity for us to tell a really targeted message to that audience. So that's kind of where we're at. And again, we'll be doing our kind of more public launch of this in the next couple of weeks, but just wanted to share with you all kind of as we get to the end of this journey that you have been on, and many of you have provided input, where we're at. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Michelle, this is Bill Pink. Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for this presentation. Couple of things, a couple of comments and then a question. First of all, I was really expecting to see one of those billboards that had someone studying at a table in a national championship football program from Ferris State in the background, but that's okay. So here's what I'm wondering. So with some of the work we're doing right now, with the Growing Michigan campaign of the Growing Michigan Council that the governor had appointed several folks to looking at how do we grow population in the state, and several subcommittees to that work right now that lead up to the council. And as you know, Hillary Doe here in the state is that new really chief growth officer for the state. Hillary and her team really lead that in that effort. I'm on the I chair the subcommittee that's focused on higher education. Just from a comment perspective, I think with this kind of work that is so focused on just that, bringing talent, bringing people to the state, whether it be for recreation or to live, I just think a pretty good connection there, if there's not already a connection, so that we're all kind of, you know, still see what each other is doing and able to complement at the right level. So I would recommend, if that conversation or if that connection hasn't happened with Hillary, I think that'd be helpful. The other thing is, as you talk about, excuse me, the idea and getting to college campuses, I love that idea. I would recommend, as you do that, you know, the idea of the Michigan life with many of our students here. That notion of stay in Michigan, I think, is a very strong message that can be accompanied by the kind of information that I know that you will be bringing to our campuses. I would strongly suggest that if you're able to get to many of our campuses, to really talk to our students and push that messaging around the idea of how focused they are of staying in Michigan, planting roots, finishing college, plant roots in Michigan. Some folks who live here, who are coming to our universities and colleges, you live here in the state, finish your degree, stay in the state. We have many students on our campus who are from out of state. You're here in Michigan, you're getting your education. What does it look like for you to stay in Michigan? So I look forward to doing all we can from at least our university's perspective in working with you. And hopefully if you come to Big Rapids for a visit, to work together on how that kind of messaging and what we can do to push that to our students and encourage them of the value proposition of staying in the state that they are getting their education. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pink. I think a couple of things. Hillary Doe is very much at the table for all this. We were able to even get her on set for some of the shoots, and she has been part of that process. And she and I are continuing, along with Carrie Ebersol-Singh, to stay very close to each other as the Population Growth Council is coming forward with the recommendations. I would also say, like, we see this as not a train that's leaving the station, but like a train that's really just like, this is the starting line, not the finish line. And we know that there's work to do to evolve and to grow this. And I think what comes out of the Population Growth Council will be really important to inform how this campaign continues to evolve and grow. From just a targeted tech campaign. So that was like a really important place for us to start, but we know that there is more to come, and we're going to be working really closely based on some of those recommendations. And I appreciate your comments about students, and I think, you know, continuing to hear feedback from you all on how we can continue to plug in, because one, a lot of work went into this, and I think we're really excited. We want to tell that story. And so I think continuing to be partners with you all and on the best way to get in front of, in your case, your students, is something we're really eager to do.
Here we go. Thank you for that. I guess I just have a couple questions. So I'm in the land of what do we know and who are we targeting? So my questions are twofold. In regards to what do we know about particularly Michiganian young people that choose to stay in Michigan? So do we know that A, B, C, D really are the key things that make them say, hey, I'm staying in the state? Now, I know that can vary. And then wondering, what does a win look like? So right now, are we keeping 10% of the students that are going to Fair State, national champion football team.
Two-time national.
Two-time national champion. They did lose yesterday, but anyway, what do we know about how many are staying? And then what would our target be? If we could get 20% of Michiganian students to stay in our state, what does that do? So that's one. And then I'll ask the last one as if I find it. No, I guess I could sort of mix them together. So in all those categories, whether it's Michiganians, whether it's folks from surrounding states, do we have target numbers, measures that would really mean that we've had an impact, and what do we know about this?
Yeah, and I will say, I think this is a long game, right? Like this isn't we're not gonna run the campaign for a year and the problem solved, and this is part of that will come out of Population Growth Council, right? One of their charges is to set those goals for the state, and then it will be our job to work through how this campaign can help achieve that broader statewide goals. We did do research going into this to try to understand, and we talked to a lot of Michigan students, and I'm happy to share that with you about perceptions, why they stay, why they go. It's interesting, one of the big perceptions for students here in Michigan that we have to overcome is that there's not exciting nightlife, like the idea of a big city life, which is why you see in this creative some of those more club scenes and nightlife scenes, and it's not just all lakes and waters and trees, right? Because that is something we heard from the research. They do not think that they have the opportunity for that exciting big city life. So there are versions of that video that we saw that we will splice and dice, right? That was the longest form, but when we're targeting students, if we have to do a 15-second, we're gonna lean into those pieces versus when we're targeting out of state family, we'll lean into the family pieces. I know Business Leaders for Michigan also has some really good data on people coming, people going. We know that a lot of the migration in and out is really focused on that Midwest region. Our campaign is looking at places where there's a high density of the degrees that we're looking to target, but also this a high density of Michigan expats or folks with people with degrees in Michigan to get them back, right? There will always be some students who want to go away, but making sure we're priming them before they even leave that like they're gonna come back here at some point. So I don't know that we have the exact, it's 20%, it's that. I think we're waiting a little bit to see what the Population Growth Council comes with to kind of back into that broader statewide goals. I think the other piece of this is there's the awareness, but there is also, and I mentioned the lead gen, how are we actually getting those people once they raise their hand and see an ad to get connected with a job, and trying to track on the other side of that scale, how many real positions have we filled through these efforts? And marketing can't do it alone, but we are very cognizant that we're going to be an important front door to helping our Michigan employers fill the jobs that they have here in the state. And I'm happy to I will send you that report. It's got some really interesting facts in there.
Thank you.
Good.
I'm good.
We have a comment from Ms. Lejeune Montgomery Tabron.
Hi, everyone. I just wondered, kind of a follow-up question. If we think about the cities we compete with, who are our competitors in this space as we are trying to convince young people to move here, and those with the archetype that we are thinking about, where do they go if they don't go to Michigan?
Yeah, and again, I think, and I'm happy to send as a follow-up kind of our targets, because one of the cross sections that I didn't mention is the industries that we're looking to target, right? So we know that people who are engineers are, a lot of them going to the West Coast. And so looking at those places where there is a perception of this is where you got to go. If you're a software engineer, you have to go here. Or if you're in the semiconductor industry, you have to go here. So we've got that list, and The good news is we've got a really strong value proposition, right? We've got a better cost of living. We've got more water and resources. I think one of the things, going back to the earlier point about why do people leave, we've found that the cost of living argument doesn't resonate as well with students, right? So they could make $90,000 here and get so much more. But the fact that their paycheck says they can get 130,000 out in Silicon Valley, that number is what's driving them. And so it feels like more. And so I think that's one of the areas where we need to continue to work, is to help understand it's not just that you make more, but what you get and the value that brings. And that is a candidly more compelling case for folks who are a little bit further in their career and starting a family than for folks that are just getting out of school and looking to get their start.
If I may, to Ms. Lejeune, in addition to what Michelle said about Silicon Valley, I think in the Midwest, there's a bit of a buzz still about Chicago, the Twin Cities. Columbus increasingly is becoming buzzworthy. I do think Nashville is very hot right now. The NC Tri, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, if you're in the life science, biotech. Atlanta, particularly for folks of color, Black folks, continues to be a place that people go to. But I think if we sort of said about a Big Ten catchment, we really, as Chicago, the Twin Cities, Columbus, Indianapolis to a lesser extent, but those would be, as we do some peer research work, and you can also see, and this gets back to the Make It in Michigan, this is why it underscores the imperative of that three-legged stool of people, places, and projects. You've got to win projects in sectors in which young people sort of say, hey, I can see myself in the economy plugging in there. So for what it's worth.
Thank you, Quentin.
Thank you. Very helpful. And I was just wondering, as we continue in this space, if we can, determine what our competitive advantage is with those places. And just, I know you were saying it's cost of living, but cost of living and I think quality of life, or a life that one wants to live, has to go together. So maybe as we continue to drill into this, is coupling some of those things, because some people will say, yeah, it may be cheaper, but there's nothing to do, so you have to combine these messages to get to that competitive advantage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. We'll now turn it over to Steve McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you also our committee members, and especially the subcommittee members. We did have a chance to meet a couple weeks ago and went over a lot of this information, had a really healthy discussion, and I know Dr. Pink will have some comments to make later on. But as you see in the title here, I'm going to talk about some of where we're projected to end for fiscal year 23. I know we have a couple more weeks to go here, and then also look at some of the proposed targets that we're looking at for next year. But I want to step back a little bit. You heard Quentin talk a little bit about kind of that economic development framework, people, places, and projects. And what you're really going to see here is how that really aligns with our vision for the state and our MEDC. It's, how do we build a more resilient, equitable, and fast-growing economy? And the way you do that is through those people, places, and projects. And you'll see that, that thread throughout the presentation here. Because really what our strategy does, what our scorecard and metrics does is really holds us accountable and makes us, understand what our, what does success look like? What does success look like when we're talking about people, places, and projects? What are the activities that we need to invest in, projects, programs, initiatives that we need to invest in to get us there? How do we make the most impact with our budget? Every year we go through this process of establishing our targets. It's really hand in hand with our budget, because our budget is a reflection of our values, Our values are, is our vision to help build a more resilient, equitable, and fast-growing economy. So there's kind of two major components as we talk about our metrics. One that's focused more on that long-term vision. When we talk about becoming a more resilient and equitable and fast-growing economy, what does that mean? As you recall, a few years ago, we went through a process of, establishing some 5-year goals and targets to help us understand what success looks like when we talk about resilience. And when we say resilience, it's, we're going to focus on these specific sectors, these specific projects that help Michigan's economy become more resilient. And what does that actually mean at the end of the day? I know earlier questions about, what does that number look like for on the marketing side? In terms of for projects, it's, how many jobs in what specific industries do we need to grow to become a more resilient economy? And, through the work that we've done with McKinsey and others, we show that, over 5 years, we need to generate over 100,000 net new jobs beyond just what Michigan is expected to grow in specific sectors. And you'll see that, over second year into our 5-year plan, we're on our way to achieve that. Focusing on these industries again helps us diversify Michigan's economy. When we look at becoming a more equitable economy, we look at also our support, making sure that it's not just in areas that are growing, but also in areas that need it the most. And we established a long-term target of 65% of our assistance should focus in those places that need it more than others. So those disadvantaged areas, those that have higher unemployment rate, higher poverty rates. Prior to our strategy implementation, less than half, 40 some percent was going to those places. So we're making progress. We're projected to end at 55%. And, continuing to next year, we want to get into our steady state of 65%, over, 2/3 of our support going in those areas. We want to also have, again, in terms of that equity perspective, supporting those businesses, those diverse businesses, those women, minority, and veteran-owned businesses. Right now, we're measuring primarily support services to those businesses, and that's why you see us achieving much higher than our target. Our target really there, that 35 long-term target is really a reflection of the percentage of businesses in Michigan that are women, minority, and veteran-owned. We want to at least match that. We're actually beating that. This coming up here, we're going to look at some new ways of measuring all our programs and services. Right now, it's fairly focused on our technical assistance, but we want to look at other programs as well. And then obviously, we want to focus on the customer and making sure we're doing this in the right way. So really, these were, again, established as 5-year targets, but just wanted to show you how we're doing in terms of our tracking to our long-term vision, which again aligns with people, places, and projects. But in terms of the year to year, so while this is kind of showing us the why, why are we doing this? How does this match against our vision? It's really the focus areas, each of those focus areas that provide us an opportunity to look at how are we doing against.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
So really, it's 2 questions. One is for the focus industry jobs, we missed the target both years.
It's actually, I wouldn't say it's missed. It's this is going back. That's the target. 90% of target is what we consider success. So it's not like 100%. It's 90 to 100% is considered target. So this is we expected. We may actually have one more MSF board meeting coming up that actually might beat this. But that's the reason we have the 5-year 100,000 goal is knowing that some years we may be under, some years we may be over because of different cycles in the economy. But most targets we look at in terms of success, it's 90 plus is considered making the goal. If you have feedback on that, we obviously.
Why set a goal then? We're not going to reach it, or at least let's plus up the other years so we still have a chance to get done.
Yep. How do we make it up in the following year? Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion. Again, looking at it from more of the 5-year perspective, it's how do we make sure we're at the end, it's 100,000 is what we're trying to get to, not versus.
So we're on track for 98. We're actually probably 95 if the future years go the same way.
Go the
last
same
year. Should we try?
Yeah. We can look at that. Are you suggesting for fiscal year 24?
I mean, you can
Yeah.
evenly distribute it across the years or graduate it so that you have time to ramp up, because the trend went down 500, which is, to your point, still within the range, but statistically significant.
No, they'll definitely, yeah, we can make that adjustment. Absolutely. In terms of let's go into the strategic focus areas, and one of the things we'd like to do here is just look at, there are 6 focus areas in our strategic plan, but how does that look like across the state? When you look at fiscal year 23, we had, jobs, pathway jobs, focus industry jobs, investments, place-based projects, infrastructure projects, public spaces reactivated throughout the state. You saw this, and this is not actually going through the end of the year. What you're seeing here, just projects that have been approved. I think this was through August. But you see that we had outcomes in almost every part of the state. But as we look at every focus area of our strategic plan, let's look at the first one. In terms of attracting, retaining, and growing businesses, there's 5 primary goals that we have there, showing there the fiscal year 23 targets, as well as the fiscal year 24 proposed outcome. And then also showing you a look at kind of the budget that we had in fiscal year 23, as well as a proposed budget that I know Jill will go through in terms of our how we want to utilize this funding to support the fiscal year 24 outcome. So this is one where, again, when we talk about people, places, and projects, what we want to make sure we've got the sites that we can do these projects in. We want to make sure we're focused on employing good jobs and creating good jobs through our pathway jobs. And obviously we want to generate those investments. And so these are the metrics that we track here on a year-to-year basis in terms of, are we getting the right types of jobs? Do we have the sites identified? And then are we generating that investment? You see here from a investment perspective, $13 billion of private investment that we expect to generate, projected to end. Oh, I'm sorry, our target was 13 billion, projected to end a little bit over that. Proposed outcome, looking again at our pipeline. A lot of this is looking at historical performance in our pipeline. We expect, actually less than that, but from an aspirational perspective, we want to overachieve. We're targeting 12.5 billion there. Total jobs, we are, beyond just focus industry jobs, we also look at total jobs. Our target there is 24,500. So, that earlier slide was just specifically focused on those specific sectors. But we also support other jobs as part of that overall target. In terms of sites identified, sites controlled, those are additional sites identified and controlled that the team wants to focus on the following year. Obviously, there's a finite number of these that the team is going to be looking at. And then in terms of pathway jobs, we did end the year, this is looking at the percentages of those jobs that we incentivized. Oh, thank you. Looking at a different slide. The percentages of those jobs that we incentivized versus the total. We ended the year at 43% of those being pathway jobs, but from a steady state perspective, we actually want to go 60% of the total jobs to be pathway jobs. Those are jobs that are pay above the ALICE threshold or get people or train them up to achieve incomes above an ALICE threshold. We also outlined some of the major initiatives, kind of the next level down of these initiatives would be specific strategies and tactics that the teams would be undertaking. But for each of these focus areas, you'll see the specific initiatives, and in bolded are some areas that are adjusted or changed or added to this fiscal year. In terms of supporting and growing our talent, this is the work from Jerry and the Talent Action Team. Thank you. In terms of the number of people trained and impacted through their services, they are projected to meet their target or above their target, have the same outcome next year. Interns placed was a little, they didn't achieve their total interns placed through the program. A lot of that was due to the fact that My STEM Forward program, which was primarily administered as a statewide program, but run by Ann Arbor Spark, we transitioned that to MEDC this year. So there was a lot of lull time and where it wasn't very active, didn't have the support and the funding. But next year, and based on the targets that they're looking at, hope to achieve over 600 interns placed on that program next year. In terms of developing attractive places, this is, as it's, in terms of people, places, or projects, where are we doing? How are we impacting the communities? There's a tremendous amount of community development projects that we do throughout the state. In fiscal year 23, over 120 place-based projects were led by the team. They had a target of 55, so overachieving there. They also supported a lot of technical assistance projects, so beyond just the actual mixed-use development projects, we also assisted a lot of communities and redevelopment ready communities program as an example. Over 130 projects that they supported. And then housing units was a new metric that we added last year because a lot of these mixed-use development projects have a housing component to them. They did achieve over 2,100 housing units supported. The target was 1,000. And then public infrastructure projects, they met their target. That target does go down next year, and that's primarily due to the fact that, the CDBG funding that supported a lot of these projects is now moving over to MSHDA. So this is the reason you see that target being lower.
Could you state the acronyms?
Oh, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Program. That's a federal program that the state received funding. Some of it was, administered by MEDC to support economic development. This past year, and actually this next fiscal year, that portion will be going to MSHDA to support housing primarily. Lynn, I don't know if you want to add anything or add.
Yes, the annual allocation, so it's approximately 34 million on an annual basis we receive from HUD to administer the Community Development Block Grant Program.
I just want,
Okay.
I understand it.
Okay.
We tend to use acronyms in this room. We have people listening.
Fair enough.
So
Fair enough.
we
Thank
need
you.
to probably
Fair enough.
ease on that.
Will do.
Yes, so that program will be transitioning at the end of this fiscal year with the affiliated staff to administer at the Michigan State Housing Development Authority.
Thanks, Lynn. Also focused on not just, projects, for the large companies, but also how are we supporting the high-tech innovation, the startups, the early stage companies, the spinoffs from our universities. There was some SSBCI, State Small Business Credit Initiative funding that was the state received from US Treasury a few years ago. Some of that will be dedicated for venture capital funding to support early stage companies. So that's why you see some of the increase there. But they're primarily focused on three major outcomes here is helping new innovation business starts, new tech companies start, helping them kind of along the path of commercializing their products, and then helping them with follow-on funding, getting additional funding, not just support from MEDC, but receiving additional funding from pre-seed funds and venture capital funds. So all three metrics this year, they're projected to beat. And then you see some of the outcomes that they're looking at for next year, which are also in some cases an increase due to the fact that they have more funding available to deploy next year. And then supporting small businesses. Also, this is an area that also received some federal funding, and a lot of their services here are provided through a lot of partners throughout the state, a lot of partners in the ecosystem. So when you look at the number of small businesses assisted, their target was 10,800. They're projected to, and slightly lower than that at 9,700, but wanting to move that over to 11,000. Next year, a lot of this year will be spent on actually standing up a lot of the programs through the funding. So we'll see a lot of outcomes probably actually more in 25 and 26, but we'll still see a significant amount of small businesses supported, as well as new business starts. Facilitated revenue, this is where the small business team is really bringing buyers and small businesses together to find purchasing opportunities, contracting opportunities. So those are actual contracted dollars that the team tracks, that commitments that Michigan purchasers, or sometimes in some cases even out-of-state purchasers, are making to small businesses that we helped provide some matchmaking support in. And then last but not least, in terms of our marketing efforts here, not just our business marketing, but also our, thank you, Pure Michigan marketing. There's 3 new metrics here that the team has proposed. You know, in the past, it was how do we get more prospects through our business marketing campaign? And you see where they ended the year there, over 17,800 new business prospects against their 13,000 target. We also have a target on how effective our Pure Michigan campaign is. And we have our projected year and outcomes there for that. But then there's some additional metrics here that the marketing team has proposed and wants to track, because it really aligns again with some of the marketing efforts that we saw earlier. You know, first and foremost is how are we doing against our peers? We heard a little bit about that. Who are we competing with? We want to ask those folks, especially the decision makers, in this case, site selectors, that are seeing our marketing efforts against and seeing other states' marketing efforts. How are we doing against our competition? So we're establishing a target there. We want to also, you know, through a lot of this marketing effort, is we want to change national business climate perception as well as in-state business climate perception, knowing that there's a lot of different factors that impact perceptions, but from our perspective, we think, you know, our dollars should at least help move the needle there. And so looking at establishing new proposed outcomes that we don't have baselines in, but we want to look at, you know, establishing a baseline and tracking that in the following years. The following slides are really just definitions for each of these, in case anybody wants to know how are we tracking this specific metric in each of these focus areas. What are those goals and targets? But these 6 focus area targets are really what we're going to, you know, the subcommittee is going to be asking for review and adoption. But, you know, Mr. Chair will definitely look at the 5-year targets as well and see how we can adjust those as well. Yeah. Happy to take any questions before we move on, but I know Dr. Pink will likely have comments later.
Any questions for Steve or comments? Okay. We will go to Jill next.
Do you want to vote on scorecard targets? Are you doing all the presentations first? Okay. There we go. Good morning, everyone. So I want to go over today and also again, kind of to reiterate what Steve said, thanks for everyone on the finance subcommittee, the finance subcommittee members. We did meet several times to discuss the corporate budget, including ensuring there's strategic alignment with our strategic goals and outcomes. So this is our recommendation after those discussions. So the first slide is just a budget comparison showing what we approved last year, FY23 compared to FY24. We'll go over later on in the presentation of why there's these differences, but there is about a $13.5 million decrease in the overall budget compared to 23. Most of that is in programs and grants funding. And like I said, we will discuss that further, but just to show the overall breakdown of the FY24 proposed budget in the graph. Salary and wages is 38.6. Programs and grants is 35.2%. Marketing is at 16.3%. And administrative operations is about 10%. The next slide is just showing our corporate revenue trends, and where we've been over the last 5 years. Our main source of revenue is tribal gaming revenue, including online gaming as well as, casino gaming. Fees and investments also is another source, as well as we do get state funding reimbursements, MSF, funding reimbursements for, corporate employees as they work on state programs. Interlocal and other revenues, that started like, in FY '23 and is mainly related to defederalized, state small business credit initiative federal funding, that we received back in 2010, 2011. So it was the first, round of SSBCI funding. That has now defederalized, and we are reusing it or reallocating the use of it for other needs within the corporation, and started using that revenue in '23. We did budget, that is a pretty good bump in that money, 34.4 million of what was received. We budgeted 21 million in '23 to utilize. A lot of that was defederalized revenue that we already had on hand. We got additional funds that came in throughout the year. So that will really be used towards more the '24 budget to help fund that budget, any of that excess that was not budgeted in '23. But you could see for tribal gaming, we have been trending up over, the last few years. This year we are a little bit down on our projected or going into '24. We do work closely with the Gaming Control Board to double check our projections with what revenues we think we'll be getting in. And we usually get a range. For conservative means, we do usually go on the lower end just to be on the safe side. We are also receiving online gaming revenues, as I said. That does seem like that has stabilized over the last few months, and of that 64.6 million, about 19 million of that will be from online gaming. The next slide, available revenues compared to spending. We do this just to show that we are always considering what are our revenues available, ensuring that we are keeping fund balance there for if something unexpected happens, or if there's a need for us to come back later in the year potentially for a budget adjustment. So we are always mindful that we're keeping a balance there for us to ensure that for future years, as well as if there's anything unexpected that may occur in the current year. Next slide, operational budget by focus area. So this is just to kind of show overall our budget, including state revenues. So total line item budget. So this does not include salaries in here, but 951.7 million. And there was some significant one-time items that are included in here that are in the state budget. So I'll go over that on the next slide. Of that 951.7 million, the corporate budget is 57.8 million. And as you could see from, we do this based on our strategic areas or strategic focus areas, as well as non-payroll admin and other type of expenses, as well as state debt service. We do pay debt service on a couple of MSF funded bonds that we get appropriations for. And you can see that attract and retain and grow and develop attractive places. Those are our two biggest areas, followed by support small businesses. And then the other areas are smaller dollar amounts that we have. But just to show you where the dollars line up with the strategic focus area on a percentage basis. And then this is just showing, how much corporate is being utilized, the corporate funds compared to state. Usually this is a little bit higher on the corporate side. The last few years, it's been more like around the 14%, but because of that significant, utilizing significant one-time dollars that the state had between general fund dollars that were available and ARPA or American Rescue Plan federal dollars that were available. The percentage that is corporate is a little bit less, not that it's necessarily we're spending using less corporate dollars. It's just a overall percentage of the overall pot. So 6.1% is corporate. As you can see, there's a breakout by focus area of just the corporate funds. And this, we use corporate funds mainly for marketing the state. There's a lot of business marketing dollars as well as sponsorship dollars that are used with the corporate dollars. We also have non-payroll, so that's like your IT, HR, finance type of costs, audit costs, legal costs are coming out of the corporate at 21.8. We do still support quite a bit with attract and retain and grow, as well as develop attractive places. And we also utilize quite a bit of corporate dollars for support and grow talent. As you can see, it's more of a even mix on the corporate side compared to some with the state side between the strategic focus areas. Besides the support small business, that's where most of the funding is coming out of the state, as well as entrepreneurship, which is not on here. That is mostly coming out of the state or is coming out of the state. So.
Jill, before we go to that, Ms.
Oh.
Montgomery took her on, right? I don't know if she still has a question. She had her hand up and then went down.
Yes, thank you. I was getting a little confused by when I look at the support and grow our talent. In the operational budget by focus area, that seemed to be a very tiny sliver, the 2.7%. And then the next slide, though, which is the corporate breakdown, support and grow our talent, was more like 18%. I was just trying to understand that transition. And then my larger question is, are we spending enough on support and grow our talent if we're really trying to compete with some of these other places and make sure that we have talent ready for the opportunities?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So for talent, we do not on the state side have a large amount of dedicated funding for us related to talent. However, Leo does have quite a bit between workforce development federal funds, and they get additional funding for like Reconnect, Growing Pro, those type of things. They also have some funding related to the population council that's going on right now. They have, and I know quite a bit of it is federal funding, so they have to follow federal rules. But in their FY24 budget, it's about $700 million that was appropriated for them. So our share is not. We have not received much. We have received some, but not much that's been dedicated to talent. But there are other areas within the state that have, and we work very closely with them on ensuring that talent is being looked at holistically from a business development standpoint as well. So this chart right now that's up, the difference is because it's looking at the first graph, the bigger one, which with the overall 951.7 million, is looking at the overall pot of including state funding. So because of that, that fact that we don't get a lot of state funding for talent, it makes the percentage go down in that overall. I guess I can go back to it. This overall spending plan graph with including the state funding, but this other one, that second little pie chart that shows that breakout, is just related to the corporate funding piece. So we are using, about 20% of our, 18.2% of our corporate dollars that are available to us for talent needs.
Hey, Jill, may I just, if I may
Yes.
just chime in to Ms. Lejeune's question, and just for just as a reminder, if you all recall, MEDC is part of the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, which is LEO. So LEO is the umbrella agency that Governor Whitmer, when she was elected took office in 2019, So under Leo, you have Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, you have MEDC, you have MISHA, although we are independent agencies for the state budgeting purposes, we roll up through Leo. And so I wanted to just flag that. So as part of the governor's push to make sure that we operate as one, really Team Michigan across all of our agencies, as Jill has outlined, a lot of the follow-up support for talent, workforce development, engagement with Michigan Works, all that flows through the Leo budget, and we work in great concert with the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity for that. So I just wanted to make sure as a mental note that although we're independent, we sort of fall, I guess, the analogous in the military, because I just got a text from my daughter who's a Marine. The Marines are an independent branch, but they fall under the Navy still. And that's
Yeah.
the way to think about MEDC and Leo, if that's.
Hey,
okay.
Quentin, that is very helpful. Can I, just one follow-up question? I'm wondering if it would be helpful for a presentation from another part of Leo for us to understand what's going on in the state around growing our talent, so that we have a better sense of how to align and where to push, because that's critical. And for that, I personally can say, I don't know how those dollars are being spent to grow talent across the state. And knowing that would be very helpful as we're leaning into marketing and some of the other areas that we're expending resources. I know you guys probably work hand in hand, but from a board standpoint, it would be nice to know that component as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We can make that. And Amy or Kristen or Jen or anybody can help me on this one. I believe that there is some membership on the statewide workforce development board. Is there overlapping or no?
There's overlap.
There's overlap. Go ahead, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
There's overlap between MEDC and Leo.
Yeah, but I was talking about on the workforce development board. Is there like I thought there was a designee from the MEDC executive committee on the.
There is.
Okay.
There is. I'm the designee.
Okay, well then there you have it. Okay, I didn't just imagine it. I guess the point of sorry to drag everybody through my cluttered mind was to say yes to Ms. Lejeune, and we will make sure that we facilitate that at one of our future meetings, and Amy and others will work to do that. I would just say parenthetically that within the last, I would argue, 6 months, I think the relationship in the engagement between Leo and MEDC, I mean, I know that multiple staff members have multiple meetings on a weekly basis with Leo on multiple topics. So I think it makes a lot of sense, all the sense in the world, and we'll make sure that happens.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
The next slide goes over, because of the large amount of state funding that is in our spending plan amounts. I just wanted to go over some of the more non-recurring state funds that are factored into there. You can see there's a list here, $250 million for site readiness, $150 million for revitalization and placemaking program. That was between a GF supplemental as well as some dedicated funding that's going to come from the CIT over the next couple of years. $95 million in federal American Rescue Plan Act dollars. There are 3 programs there that we got funding for, one being included talent action teams, fast track system, $15 million, $75 million for small business support hubs that I know Amy Renter has discussed before here, $5 million for arts and cultural programs too, There is additionally 50 million in community development block grant disaster recovery funds. Although some CDBG funds did go to MISTA, we are retaining the disaster recovery aspect of that. And those are factored into this budget. And then there are some one-time dollars related to marketing and travel with 10 million to promote Michigan for special events and 10 million for convention and visitor bureaus. So I just wanted to highlight those because of the large dollar amount, just to indicate these significant one-time dollars that are factored into the budget. And then here's just highlights on what's in the proposed corporate budget, including some comments related to the changes that I noted before, the $13 million change in the budget. Revenues, 64.6 million from tribal gaming, 45.4 million of that from casinos, the remainder 19.2 from online gaming, 9.1 million of state funding to corporate to cover staffing, and then 18 million in defederalized SSBCI funds are factored into it. Staffing, we do have a total budgeted corporate FTEs of 235, number of 8 increase from FY23. And then also we have factored in projected cost of living and insurance increases into the budget. We do have some program eliminations and baseline reductions included. Most of these eliminations are due, or reductions are due to the fact that we did receive some dedicated state funds related to these programs, or if it's not with us, it was within other aspects of the state budget. So there was no need to keep the corporation providing that funding. Funding shifts between the corporate and state. We did do a few funding shifts on programs. We moved some IT services to corporate from GF funds. We moved research from state GF to corporate funds, and then our Match on Main program, there is some dedicated MSF funds that we can use for the next few years. So we did move that as well to state funds. There are a couple of new programs and or baseline increases, around 900,000 for international contractors. You know, it is very important to make sure that we have presence in various countries in order to ensure that we are competing for these new onshoring, reshoring opportunities for the state. Increase of 600,000 for marketing, events, and sponsorship needs. There is continued growing requests and needs for that, especially as events are coming more back online as with after the end of the COVID pandemic. And we also have built into this budget a new strategic priorities contingency funding of 1 million. This would be similar to, as some may remember, we did do a strategic priority $8 million program last year when we were able to in FY22 when we had some vacancy savings. So we felt that there would be a good need to at least do some in this budget in order to give us some room to pivot if there is something that comes up unexpected that we would need funding for. And that is it for me, and I can take any questions that you may have.
Any questions or comments for Jill? Hearing none. Do we have anything else in the CEO report? Oh, sorry. Ms. Feldposh.
Awanati, this is Beth. Just a quick question. We
Okay.
have to approve this budget. Are we doing that now, or are we saving approval?
We're gonna save all the approvals for the end,
Okay,
as well as the scorecard and a personnel and compensation adjustment.
That's the end of the CEO. You go into that.
Okay, perfect. And we will get to the approval shortly. Thank you for teeing that up well. I believe Steve said Dr. Pink might have some updates from the strategic planning subcommittee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And from our standpoint, really, I'll be brief because it is what leads into making a motion to adopt the targets for FY '24. I want to thank the Strategic Planning Subcommittee for our conversation that we had a couple weeks ago. Thanks to Steve also for his good work. Our subcommittee with Mayor Hopewell, Mr. Schultz, and Ms. Montgomery Tabron had a really good conversation, good discussion. One of the things that came out of that, friends, is the notion that we as a subcommittee want to have in plan what I would call more off-cycle conversation as a subcommittee to look at these target areas that we've been focused on, and do a deeper dive on those focus areas, and just look at more data in terms of what those focus areas include and can include going forward. Also, we'll welcome some of our the MEDC leadership and staff and others in that work, as well, as we want to have that kind of conversation. But those areas very focused, and we want to put the FY '24 targets forward to the executive committee for approval. And so I will make that motion at this point to adopt those for FY '24 as targets as presented earlier.
Thank you, Dr. Pink. Is there a motion for approval of the FY '24 scorecard targets as Dr. Pink just outlined?
So moved, Krista Flynn.
Support, Hopewell.
We have a motion from Krista Flynn and support from Bobby Hopewell. Any discussion or additional questions needed before the vote? Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call vote.
Ms. Ardizana.
For.
Ms. Baidoon. Ms. Baidoon. Brown to her. Mr. Caldwell.
Aye.
Mr.
Apologies.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Baidoon. What's your vote, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Cabina.
Support.
Ms. Clovis. Support. Ms. Flynn.
Support.
Mr. Hopewell.
Support.
Mr. Lutz.
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Dr. McMahon.
Yes.
Ms. Montgomery Tabron.
Yes.
Mayor Neely.
Yes.
Dr. Pink.
Yes.
Mr. Rich.
Support.
Ms. Thorson.
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak.
Support.
And Dr. Walker Griffia.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes.
Great, thank you. I think we'll now move to the finance subcommittee in advance of the FY '24 spending plan approval. Ms. Ardisana.
First of all, like Dr. Pink, I want to thank the committee for the significant amount of work and the staff on the budget. You know, our goal in this budget presentation we've just completed is to make sure, one, we have a responsible budget, but most importantly, we support the strategic plan and the work of Dr. Pink and his committee. So we think we have aligned the budget with the strategic plan and used the money in the best way possible. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the budget if nobody has any further questions.
Do we have a motion and support? Motion. We have a
Support.
motion from Mike McLaughlin, support from
Krista Flynn.
Krista Flynn. Any additional questions or discussion before the vote? Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call vote.
Ms. Ardisana.
For.
Ms. Baidoon. Ms. Baidoon. Mr. Caldwell.
Aye.
Mr. Cabina.
Support.
Ms. Clovis. Ms. Flynn. Support. Ms. Hopewell, or Mr. Hopewell, excuse me.
Yes.
Mr. Lutz.
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Dr. McMahon.
Yes.
Ms. Montgomery Tabron.
Yes.
Mayor Neely.
Yes.
Dr. Pink.
Support.
Mr. Rich.
Support.
Ms. Thorson.
Yes.
Mr. Tomzak.
Support.
Dr. Walker Griffia.
Yes.
And let me circle back. Ms. Baidoon, did you want to record a vote for this, the budget? Yes. Thank you. And that motion passes as well.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Flynn, do you have any updates from the Personnel and Compensation Subcommittee?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I am new to the PNC committee. We met recently to discuss two issues that we're bringing forward today to the executive committee. The first is to ensure that our subcommittee charters accurately reflect the responsibilities of the body and frankly, what is already in practice. I was going to turn it over to Lynn to go over those details if she's in the room.
Lynn.
I am. Thank you, Krista. First, would like to welcome our two new members to the PNC subcommittee, Krista as our esteemed chair, which has been a long time coming. We're thrilled to have her, as well as Beverly Gracia. I always pronounce that wrong, Beverly. I got it right today. So welcoming them and to onboarding them in our first PNC meeting. We had started the work of revising very modestly our charter with our prior chair. And have carried forward those discussions with our new PNC committee. Maybe. That might not be working, Amy. Most of what you'll see, which were advanced in your board packet, are a lot of housekeeping and cleanup. First of which is to restate and modify the name to reflect our current and common reference, which is the Personnel and Compensation Subcommittee. The charter actually referred to it differently. The last 11 years or so I've been involved with the group has been referring to it this way. So we wanted to ensure consistency across all board records as well as the charter by appropriately renaming and referencing it as the PNC Subcommittee. We're also including references to activities and accountabilities that are currently assigned, as Krista had mentioned, and have been undertaken by the PNC subcommittee over the course of the last 10 years or so. That includes the words personnel strategy oversight. Previously, it literally only mentioned compensation. We have been operating with personnel strategy oversight as well as executive committee assignments as it relates to personnel that is attributable to the executive committees such as the CEO role. We're recognizing the required assignment and the accountability of the MEDC to ensure that the PNC subcommittee has an executive liaison so that information is provided to them and data is provided to them so they can make educated decisions for references to the board as a whole. And then there were a few grammatical corrections. With that, I'll refer back to Krista.
Are there any questions from anyone on the committee about these changes to the charter? Do we want to take the vote now, Awanati, or go into the second request before we take votes?
Let's take the vote first. Do we have a
Okay.
motion of support for the revisions to the Compensation and Personnel Subcommittee Charter?
So moved,
This is
Mayor.
Kyle, I move.
So we have a motion from Mayor Hopewell and a support or second from Kyle Caldwell. Any comments or questions or additional discussion? My only comment is that I hope that I wasn't the one that started calling it personnel
No,
compensation.
it was not you. No, you're good.
And secondly, I do really applaud Christopher taking the chair role and immediately changing the name of the committee. It shows full ownership.
I am action oriented. As minor as it may be.
Well, now you own the committee.
That's right, that's right.
Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call.
Ms. Arzana,
For.
Ms. Baydun,
Support.
Mr. Caldwell.
Aye.
Mr. Kabina,
Support.
Clovis. Ms. Flynn,
Support.
Mr. Hopewell,
Yes.
Mr. Lutz,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Dr. McMahon,
Support.
Ms. Montgomery Tabron,
Yes.
Mayor Neely,
Yes.
Dr. Pink,
Support.
Mr. Rich,
Support.
Ms. Thorson,
Support.
Mr. Tomzak,
Support.
and Dr. Walker Griffia.
Support.
Thank you. That motion also passes.
Great, thank you. Krista?
Okay, for the second item for discussion today is the corporate employee cost of living adjustment, or COLA, to ensure that we continue to attract and retain the exceptional talent that this organization enjoys. Again, I'll turn it over to Lynn to explain exactly what we're looking to do today.
So for a bit of context for our new board members, each year in September, we come to the full executive committee on the recommendation of PNC to provide a corporate employee cost of living assessment and adjustment recommendation. This year, our newly staffed, fully staffed PNC committee reviewed what the CPI Midwest was currently doing, keeping in mind that the August results were not out until last week, which was subsequent to when the subcommittee met. But our budget, however, was reflected in Jill's earlier budget overview at a 3% set aside for this purpose. We looked at in 2023 at the beginning of the fiscal year, not exclusively looking at CPI as an indicator for cost of living, but also taking into consideration the approved budgeted amount by this board. So we have the ability then to advise or recommend a cost of living increase that takes into consideration our budgeted amount as well as the Midwest CPI. Since we have met, the CPI did go up slightly to 3.4%. We have budgeted in 2024 because keeping in mind it's a unique timing structure. It's 2023 performance, but it's actually paid in 2024. So you saw that in the budget that you've just approved for 2024 based on fiscal 23 performance. So we have the flexibility between 3% and 3.4. At the time of our meeting, the committee was comfortable with making a recommendation of 3% based on the budget and then leaving to the board any adjustment thereafter.
And just for clarity, Lynn, if the board wanted to entertain something higher than 3% between the 3 and 3.4, is there room in the budget to absorb that?
Yes, my understanding is that based on vacancies from our fiscal 23 vacancy savings, there would be an opportunity to be able to cover those costs as well, based on my understanding.
That's correct.
So the resolution is drafted at the lesser CPI in the budget. The resolution is drafted at the lesser of CPI in the budget, which is 3%. Do we want to discuss that prior to entertaining a motion in second?
Yes. Yeah, if you want to do something different, we'll adapt the resolution post-meeting to reflect with the board.
Does any executive committee member have any comment on a change to the resolution up to the CPI amount of 3.4? It's a reminder, it's currently the lesser of the two, which is 3. Hearing none, I would like to entertain a motion in a second for the cost of living adjustment resolution.
I support Mayor Neely.
We have a motion from Faye Baydoun and support from Mayor Neely. Any additional questions or discussion on this resolution? Ms. Armstrong, please conduct a roll call vote.
Thank you. Ms. Artizana?
I vote for.
Ms. Baydoun?
For.
Mr. Caldwell?
Aye.
Mr. Kabina?
Support.
Ms. Clovis? Support. Ms. Flynn?
Support.
Mr. Hopewell?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. McMahon?
Support.
Ms. Montgomery Tabron? Ms. Montgomery Tabron? Mayor Neely?
Yes.
Dr. Pink?
Yes.
Mr. Rich?
Support.
Ms. Thorson?
Support.
Mr. Tomzak?
Support.
Dr. Walker Griffia?
Support.
Let me try one more time. Ms. Montgomery Tabron, do you have a vote to record for this item? She may have dropped off. Okay, your motion still passes without Ms. Montgomery Tabron.
Great, thank you. And I believe Lynn has 2 or 3 more items.
Yeah, so these are just a couple items for this group to look forward to in November. Since we have a number of new members, we wanted to provide an advanced overview of some of the activities that will occur at that time, as well as provide our finance team and finance subcommittee some advanced data going into the fiscal 25 budgeting period that we actually begin undertaking in January. So this is information that we will need on the go forward. Variable pay, this was a discussion we had in March, I believe, as it relates to 2023's performance share paid out in 2024. We had approved a 6.5% in the budget. And then going forward into the 2024 budget, we had also budgeted 6.5. Because we pay out in a new fiscal year, again, it's that kind of off cycle. But previously there had been a desire to move that forward. And we wanted to make sure that this group was comfortable with doing so. So in November, you will see an up to 6.5% payout for variable pay for fiscal 24, which was in the budget that was approved today. In fiscal 25's budget, which this group has not reviewed, but because we budget early as an organization, wanted to make sure that that dialogue occurred at the state. The desire to go back to a 8% variable pay budget for fiscal 25 for fiscal 24 performance. So no action is required on that. It's just a matter of what our team needs to budget going forward. Our benefit renewal process, our dollar amounts associated with our renewals are not in yet. So that will move as it usually does occur to our November meeting with a January 1st effective date. So we're anticipating that our benefit pricing availability, as well as our open enrollment, will occur before the November meeting, with action at the November meeting on all benefit renewals. Those dollars were budgeted at 3% increase in the budget you just approved.
So to that point, since open enrollment will happen before the meeting, how do we understand what the benefits will be in advance of approval?
We're assuming that the benefits in terms of carriers will essentially remain the same. If there is a premium share difference, so if that amount is passed on in any way to employees, that will be done before the effective date of January 1st.
Got it. But wouldn't that affect some of their choices during open enrollment?
We only have 2 choices, so probably not.
Okay.
We only really have Blue Cross and Blue Care Network, which has a small subscriber population. But would it allow that, or would it require them to reconsider perhaps the spouse's policy so that they are paid a stipend? That could happen. We would allow that to happen.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And then finally, Mr. Messer was awarded a new multi-year contract and base rate increase in January of 23. This resets the annual review process and eligibility for a board-directed base rate. That bonus opportunity and base rate increase would be considered for the January 24th period. So we will then be conducting the performance assessment process during the new review cycle for a March approval that will go retroactive for any dollar amounts approved.
Thank you.
That's it.
Great. Mr. Lutz and Jill for the audit subcommittee.
Yeah, so we met on July 26th and were presented basic reports from the OAG's office back on both the financial audit, which isn't done, just getting started actually, and a number of performance audits that were done. But I will defer to Jill to walk us through that.
Yep, we discussed there's a couple of ongoing, sorry. There's a couple of ongoing performance audits happening right now with the OAG. One is the Community Revitalization Program, as well as the Brownfield Redevelopment Financing Program. They are still conducting their field work, and we are working as needed on requests and everything. We anticipate them to finish up field work sometime over the next month or two. And then, we'll have exit meetings and such, but as you know, sometimes things get delayed with audits, but, you know, we're anticipating they'll be wrapping up over the next few months, and that audit reports will be issued, in, 2024. We also did discuss briefly our, finance audits. We did get, communications that those will be starting, which they usually always do, in October timeline. We have not had an entrance meeting yet with the OAG on that, but we anticipate that they'll be communicating with us in the near future on that. But those audits typically start up in October so it will be for this current fiscal year that's ending in, at the end of September. So that audit will really start kicking off in October and usually goes through, field work usually goes through the December, January timeline. So we'll anticipate the same this year, and see how, things go. But as I said, we haven't actually had an entrance meeting with them yet.
Great. Any questions or comments for Tom or Jill, Audit and Governance Subcommittee? Great. Were there any items that any board member wishes to have addressed that were not? Okay. Our next meeting is November 14th, which is a Tuesday per normal, at 10 a.m. in the wonderful city of Lansing, Michigan, in this same conference room. Sorry, I didn't have it on the notes. Wish you all a great day, and we will see you in November. Thank you. Thanks, everybody on the phone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.